Can you hear me?
Supposed to remind everybody else. Welcome everyone to our Heritage Board agenda, meeting for Halloween, October 31st. I see lots of costumes on today. Just a reminder, folks, when you are speaking, to press the red button and to press it again when you're not speaking so that someone else may speak. Thank you. Call to order, declarations of conflict of interest. I see none.
I don't know whether I do or not.
Okay. Let it rip.
I live in one of the adjacent properties to the application before us today. And I'm not sure whether I should recuse myself or whether I'm actually in any conflict.
I don't think anyone can make that decision except Wayne himself.
Yeah, I think, Wayne, it's kind of one of them things, if you're not feeling comfortable.
No, I'm fine with that, but I don't want to compromise. And
You know, as far as, I guess just ask yourself the question, is there anything for you to gain?
yeah,
Really, if there isn't, then I think you're good to go. Would
All
that
right.
be fair enough, say, Todd?
It's his decision to make, we can't make that decision.
Yeah, that's kind of yours, yeah, so. Okay, good. You're good. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so, outside of that, then we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. I'll need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Yankoff. And seconded by Simon. All those in favor? Thank you. Adoption of the minutes for the meeting of Wednesday, June 27th. I'll need a mover in a second, and then we'll ask if there's any business. Moved by Councillor Hancock, seconded by Simon. All those in favor? Good, great, thank you. So any business advising from those minutes, folks? I see none. Okay, great, thank you very much. So we'll get right into the report, which is 6A, 144, 156 Richmond Street, PID number 339127, and 154 and 156 Richmond Street, PID number 339119, and it's for a proposed amendment to the destination of these subject properties. And I believe, Todd, I'll let you have the floor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So it is an amendment to the size of the property that's associated with two designated buildings that front on Richmond Street by removing the back section of the two lots. The rear portions of the lots now are used as parking area, and the amendment would result in the creation of a new lot for which a proposal for new development could be entertained. All the required setbacks and planning issues would have to be addressed through the planning process. So the two properties are 144 to 50 Richmond Street and 154 to 156 Richmond Street. They are located in the middle of the block in an area that has a large number of designated properties in the historic downtown core. The original town plan had lots that ran the full depth of the block all the way from Richmond Street right back through to Sydney Street. They measured 84 by 160 feet. Most of the blocks in the downtown have now had those properties split many times to the point where in the original 500 lot area, there's about 1,500 properties. This is the 1878 panoramic view. And it just shows that development historically happened on both sides of the block, fronting on both Richmond Street and Sydney Street. This particular view predates the 1884 fire, so this shows the buildings that were there prior to the Cameron building that was built in 1885, as well as the Morris building built in 1890. So the evidence really that we have everywhere is showing that there were historically always buildings fronting on Sydney Street. This is the Gold Insurance Plan that's updated to 1917. And it's showing the, the brown block had properties that came right through onto Sydney Street. One that connected the full way through. The Cameron block had some wood frame structures. This one's 2.5 stories. The Morris block as well had a 2.5 story wood structure. And the Newsom block had masonry warehouses there as well. Queen Square School, of course, was on the corner as well. It later had an extension that carried right through. So this is showing the current lot configurations. Some of these have been cut through the block. Other blocks are typically in the downtown are cut that face one side fronting on the north street and one on the south side. So we have one lot here, the Cameron block, that runs right through. The Morris block has the same PID number but does have the separating line between. Just to be a little bit clear on what buildings we're looking at here, we have the Morris block is self-contained here, and we're dealing with 2/3, if you will, of the Cameron block, the 2/3 that are on the west side. And from the rear, we have the Morris block here, and 2/3 of the Cameron block. And so what we're looking at is the really separating off the rear parking area in the back. This is just a view up Sydney Street showing how tight it can be when it's built on both sides. View from St. Dunstan, both photos actually are just showing buildings that were fronting on Sydney Street historically. And you see on the right. We also have some photos through the 80s and 90s. This is an annex that was built on the back of Queen Square School, and some buildings that were associated with the back parts of the properties. This is essentially the current view from St. Dunstan's. When reading through the report, I think as well, you'd find that in the official plan, we're really talking about ensuring that future planning actions are trying to reinforce the historic integrity of the area and the pedestrian character of the area. And so there is an argument to be made, I think, in terms of for removing a parking area and allowing new construction to happen that would ensure the street frontage again. Any new design or any new proposal here would not come to Heritage Board if it were separated from the designated parcel. It would have to follow all the planning process, and the 500 lot plan that we brought in, it has provisions really through the design review process to look at the integrity of the proposed design. So I think that's all we have.
Thank you very much, Todd. It's hard to believe you see those buildings that's not there today, huh, from the fire. That's crazy. Yeah. Any comments, questions, concerns, folks? And and before, I'd just like to mention that I do have Councillor McCabe on the line. Hello, Julie.
Hi there, thank you.
My apologies at the start of the meeting. I left you out, so sorry about that. Anyway, yeah, any questions or comments, guys?
Excuse me, but if someone's speaking, could they turn their mic on? I just can't hear.
Sorry, yeah, just hit the button.
Okay, sorry about that. So the question was just trying to understand the intent of the application, I guess. So they're looking to subdivide the back portions of these two properties and remove the heritage designation of those components. Is that correct?
That's correct. The front part that would contain the two buildings would still be designated. And the entire heritage character statement refers to the buildings specifically. It doesn't make any mention of the rear portion.
Okay. The lots could be developed in their current state, is that correct? Because they could have multiple buildings on one lot?
I don't think so. It's my understanding they have to be subdivided.
Okay.
Any other questions or concerns? It's kind of a strange one, isn't it? You know, you just hate to see that, like from the view from Sydney, from Sydney Street, on those buildings will eventually be gone. You won't see the heritage side of that anymore, probably from the Sydney Street side, right?
From the Sydney Street side, now you see the rear of the building.
You do now.
And the parking area. Historically, there were other buildings there, often more warehouse-style buildings. You know, but I think even the, where the old Dublin pub is, had been a warehouse at one
Right,
time as
one
well,
time or
yeah.
another. Yes. Councillor Yanka.
Just a couple, I don't see, was this spurred on because there is a plan for future development? I don't see any clarity on that, and perhaps that comes up in our planning board meeting, but I just don't see, why what has made us come to here today. Thanks.
Yep, absolutely. The applicant does not have a plan yet, but certainly in the background portion of the report, it does make mention of that it's anticipated that the two remaining parcels would be consolidated and a development plan developed, yeah.
So just as a follow-up, we don't know what that development is, so could you give me an example, what could it be?
It would have to follow the 500 lot standards and the zoning for a downtown mixed-use area, assuming that the zoning would stay that. Right now, one portion is zoned downtown Main Street and the other is zoned downtown mixed-use neighborhood. And that really, again, it falls into the planning process. So they haven't yet made application for that.
Okay, thank you very much.
I just have one more.
sorry. Yeah,
I
go
just noticed here, and just from a language perspective, I just noticed in your recommendations that you are encouraging, Heritage Board is encouraging. What does Heritage Board actually recommend?
The Heritage Department?
Yeah.
We would recommend that it be approved.
Can we just, if we're doing a resolution on this, can we change that word to recommend, because they don't mean the same thing?
There's no resolution made yet. Right now, it's a recommendation. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just, I'm trying to understand, why are we encouraging the removal of the heritage designation of it? Because I'm still not, it's still not clear to me that it's impeding development. And I'm not, like, I get that they're the back of the buildings, but, and I recognize that through the process of, they're gonna have to do, site amalgamations, they're gonna have to do design review, all those other components, but I'm trying to understand, other than future buildings won't have to deal with the Heritage Board, I'm not sure what other impediments or the history. I respect that there's a history here and you know, there's a process that they need to go through, but I'm still trying to, as a member of the Heritage Board, just trying to understand why we're trying to declassify, delist it as a heritage property.
Sure. The inquiry really came about from the planners, and I'm sorry none of the planners were able to be here today. I believe when they were discussing the idea of developing the back, they couldn't develop it as 2 lots and had to subdivide it. In order to subdivide it, I don't know that it makes sense to have a heritage designation on a parking lot, because the heritage reference makes reference to the buildings. And why would we have a heritage designation stay with a new construction? What would be designated?
So,
Sorry, I think that's helpful, thank you. Now you're saying, what are we, if we're allowing them to subdivide the properties, and I think that's the first kind of thing, and then, because you could say, put an addition onto these buildings, right? Or, you know, amalgamate and whatever gets built has to be part of these structures and in theory should be considered whatever is built there, and it, you know, with respect to the buildings around it, but they wouldn't have the designation. So I think that, in my mind, is part of my question, is that, yes, new construction doesn't, but new construction attached to or adjacent to an existing designated structure certainly would. So I'm just wondering if you can allow for the subdivision, but I'm fully trying to understand whether the design review process and the 500 lots will take care of making sure that what gets built adjacent to these heritage structures is appropriate.
Sympathetic to everything around it.
Sympathetic of everything
Yeah.
around it, yeah.
And that's the process the city has to ensure that, so hopefully it does work, yeah.
if I may, yeah, because I mean, these properties have been under, there's been a lot of conversation about this whole street, right? And what's going to take place, and there's been different interests moving along, from everything from making it into a truck turnaround to, you know, what's the church going to do for parking versus where the folks are going to park now that are there in those buildings. If it, you know, it'd be nice to have a little more information as to if we're going to release this from Heritage, what's going to happen to it. Like, it'd be nice to we just seem to be shooting in the dark here, right? I mean, we understand the reasoning why. It's because they want to do something with the lots, and the lots, they can't do anything as long as it's attached to the heritage property, so, but you're right, will the other, you know, like propane, for example, was another big issue, right? All in along back of those buildings are propane canisters that, you know, will that even allow anyone to do any more building along there? You know, that was one of the big issues back in some of them other development projects that, you know, the fire department wasn't too pleased with it anyway to begin with. So, you know, it'd be nice just to know what some of these other departments are thinking before we give away a heritage destination. I guess that's where I'm at. I don't know how you guys feel with that, but that's where I'm at.
I should also mention, this is only for the heritage component, and if the subdivision never gets approved through planning, the heritage designation is not removed. This essentially would be held in abeyance until all planning requirements would be met and approved.
Councilor Yanko.
And perhaps this is opening Pandora's box into a whole other issue we have, is that we're working in silos again, and we're not really knowing what the long term is, but we're making a decision on one part of something when we don't know what the rest of it is. And I'm just concerned that we're just back to that silo thing again of not knowing the left and the right hand are doing in long term. You know, are we doing the right thing? I don't know what the answer is. It sounds like it is, but I don't know if I have enough information. Just wondering what everyone else's thoughts are.
So, is it a possibility to defer this so that we could have a planning personnel come in and explain a little, give us maybe a little tidbit more of information? Would that be something we'd be comfortable with?
I'm always kind of confused because these have come up in the past where the future development, how much does it play into what we're trying to do within the actual meeting? Because these things are covered later on in planning. So it becomes blurry as to where's our role in it versus, you know, do we need to know what's going to be the future development, or is it just deciding whether that option is available or not for the next development? I find it confusing.
Is it possible to make a motion that, because it's almost like if planning and development approves the lot consolidation, well, first subdivision, then consolidations, then I almost feel like then I think then Heritage should have the ability to say yes. Like, I don't know, it's a chicken and an egg, and I'm not trying to be overly complicated, but you're right, we're being asked to say, yeah, it's fine to get rid of the heritage designation. Yes, it's an empty lot. And then we trust, I guess, and that's fair, we trust the process of the design review committee and the 500 standards to worry about the quality of the project. What are we protecting? I get we're not protecting the land, but in some ways we are changing potentially the landscape that will impact the designated structures. Yeah. It's,
Anything from you, Julie? Anything you want to add?
No, it's good discussion. Thank you.
Okay.
I kind of agree with people, though. We do work in silos, and maybe we can look at trying to bring that closer together as we move forward.
Thank you. We got 2 points. We got one that says, well, do we want to bother? Do we want to bother with worrying about what's actually coming and give up the heritage destination? But Todd also says that if it doesn't go through, that it would come back to the heritage component. So that's one part of it. And then the second part is, do we want to start, I like what Alana said too. It's and yourself, Simon, the chicken and the egg thing. And are we, planning could go ahead with this easily just to say that as long as heritage would give up the destination of the parking lot that is attached to the building, and then let them do all their work first. But it's kind of what should be first? Should this be first, or should the planning process be first?
I personally think the planning should be first, so that we have all of the components in front of us to make a decision.
Like, I think for me, I guess giving up some heritage destination would be a lot easier if you knew what was going to be there. I guess, does that make sense? I don't know.
Well, pardon me, I actually support the recommendation because I don't think that we can exercise ultimate control over what's going to happen to that in any case.
And just to flip side that though, because if these were additions, like if the developer was coming and putting on addition to these existing buildings right through to Sydney Street, you can make an argument that we would be sitting here with a design in front of us commenting on whether the design was an appropriate addition to those buildings, right? And so the only difference is it's do they show us the building anyway? I you know, because in some ways we're delisting it and then then we will never see it again from that perspective, right? As the Heritage Board. I shouldn't say never, that's harsh language, that's a bit extreme. But.
You're right, though. Yeah. Councillor Hanka.
I then would circle back to, if the Planning and Heritage Department is recommending this, then, as another flip side, they're the experts. So then we say, well, if they are recommending that this is the direction to go in, back to what Mr. McKinnon had said, you know, that's what we're looking for as a recommendation. If they're saying it's a good step, it's a tough one. Todd, any suggestions?
So, okay, so I think we beat this. So, what's on the table right now is that the Planning and Heritage Department encourages Heritage Board is the word, Heritage Board to approve this application to amend the size of the properties associated, taking away the heritage destination. So, all,
Can't be encouraged, we're supposed to be,
but,
it's supposed to be a recommending body, not an encouraging body.
right, so,
If we would change encourage to recommend.
okay.
Yeah.
So, we will change it to recommend. So the Planning and Heritage Department recommends Heritage Board to approve the application. So, I need a motion.
And this is a motion to move it on.
Yep.
A motion to move it on to council?
To go with staff's recommendation, or with staff's recommendation.
No.
To go to the
No.
planning board next.
Right, Planning Board next. No? What?
Heritage Board makes a decision.
Yeah.
No.
You'd essentially be supporting, approving that the designation, if the property were to be subdivided, that the designation would stay with the front part of the property only. You'd be approving that the rear part of the property could be released from the designation.
Okay, depending on planning. Okay, so I'll need a motion for that. So anyone want to move and second it?
Well, I move that we accept the recommendation.
Good. Okay, we have a mover. Do we have a seconder? I see not. Okay. Okay, we do have a seconder. Okay, so we do have a mover and a seconder to go with staff's recommendation for Heritage Board to approve this application. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. Julie?
I'm in favor.
That makes 4 in favor. And those against? 1 against. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. So that'll move that on to the appropriate bodies after us. And anything else there under new business? I don't think there is there? If not, I just need one more motion. And that's to adjourn. Moved by Simon, seconded by Wayne. All those in favor of adjournment? Good. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate the great conversation.